In this lesson, we will discuss about computer worm. A worm virus refers to a malicious program that replicates itself, automatically spreading through a network. In this definition of computer worms, the worm virus exploits vulnerabilities in your security software to steal sensitive information. Install backdoors that can be used to access the system, corrupt files, and do other kinds of harm. How does a computer worm spread? Now here are 8 ways we can say that worms use these ways to spread their actions. Phishing. Fraudulent emails that look authentic can carry worms and corrupt attachments. Such emails may also invite users to click malicious links or visit websites designed to infect users with worms. Spear phishing. Targeted phishing attempts can carry dangerous malware like ransomware cryptoworms. Networks. Worms can self-replicate across networks via shared access. Security holes. Some worm variants can infiltrate a system by exploiting software vulnerabilities. File sharing. Peer-to-peer file networks can carry malware like worms. Social networks. Social platforms like MySpace have been affected by certain types of worms. IM stand for instant messengers. All types of malware, including worms, can spread through text messages such as IRC, which mean Internet Relay Chat. External devices. Worms can infect USB sticks and external hard drives. Computer worm versus virus. Some people think that a computer worm and computer virus are the same things because the two behave similarly. They may even use the terms like worm computer virus or worm virus malware. The truth is that the two are comparable but different threats. The defining difference between a virus and a worm is that viruses rely on human action for activation and need a host system to replicate. In other words, a virus won't harm your system unless you run it. For example, a virus on a flash drive connected to your computer won't damage your system unless you activate it. A worm doesn't need a host system or user action to spread. What does a computer worm do? Once a computer worm has breached your computer's defenses, it can perform several malicious actions like drop other malware like spyware or ransomware, consume bandwidth, delete files, overload networks, steal data, open a backdoor, deplete hard drive space. Some of a computer worm examples. Over the years, there have been some particularly devastating worms. Some worms have caused billions in damage. Morris worm, also known as the Internet worm, this was one of the first computer worms to spread via the Internet and earn notoriety in the media. Bagel, also known as Beagle, Mickleader, and Lodite, this mass-mailing worm had many variants. Blaster, also known as MS Blast, Lovesan, and Lovesan, this worm attacked computers running Windows XP and Windows 2000. Conficker, also known as Downup, Downadup, and Keto, this worm exploited flaws in Windows to infect millions of computers in over 100 countries. I Love You, the I Love You worm infected tens of millions of computers globally, resulting in billions of dollars in damage. Midum, this became the fastest spreading email worm in 2004, sending junk email across computers. Ryuk, although Ryuk wasn't always a worm, it's now worm-like ransomware. SQL Slammer. The SQL Slammer worm gained infamy for slowing down internet traffic with denial-of-service attacks on some internet hosts. Storm worm. This worm utilized social engineering with fake news of a disastrous storm to drop botnets on compromised machines. Stuxnet. Some experts believe this sophisticated worm was developed for years to launch a cyber attack. Difference between worm and virus. Worms spread from computer to computer and can move and operate independently. A worm's ability to send out hundreds or thousands of copies of itself is one of its biggest dangers. Viruses are almost always attached to an executable file and remain dormant until the victim activates the attack, either by opening an infected application, downloading a corrupt file, or clicking a link. Viruses cannot spread without human action. Types of computer worm. Email worms. As the name suggests, an email worm spreads via email, also known as a mass mailer worm. An email worm distributes a copy of itself as an email attachment, or as a link to an infected file on a compromised or hacker-owned website. File-sharing worms. File-sharing worms embed and disguise themselves as innocent media files. When an unsuspecting user downloads the file, the worm infects their device. Once the worm has compromised the device, it can capture confidential information that the adversary can use to their advantage or sell to other attackers. IM worms. IM worms masquerade as attachments and links on social media platforms, and they frequently include content that baits the victim to click on the URL. Once it's executed, the IM worm can spread through an instant messaging network. Cryptoworms. A cryptoworm is a worm attack that encrypts data on the victim's system and then demands a ransom payment to regain access to the data. IRC worms. An IRC worm is a malicious program designed to exploit IRC channels to infect chat rooms and message forums by sending infected messages. Peer-to-peer worms. Peer-to-peer worms use the mechanisms of peer-to-peer networks to distribute copies to unsuspecting peer-to-peer users.